Okay, well, hello and welcome to episode 5 of the New Testament journey. We are together back with Tom. He's returned this week. We will get Leslie back on at some point soon, no doubt about it. But we are finishing off this week the Gospel of Luke. What a book. What a book. What a start to the journey. It's been absolutely amazing. And we are going to do those last 4 chapters of Luke, which comes into the crescendo. So, Tom, how have you found Luke and what did you see this week?
Yeah, I mean, it's in a way you're like, wow, I'm so pleased I finished one of the Gospels. Because you know there's 4 coming.
Yeah.
And Luke is a big chunky one. And I don't know about you, Andy, but I always find the passage on the cross almost the hardest to read. Mm-hmm. Because it's such a familiar topic. And it's kind of narrative. And the cross is something that can therefore become a little bit losing in its power. Mm-hmm. And reading it this week, I almost have to work hard to be like, okay, engage. What is Luke really saying here? Don't just drift through the relatively familiar passages about, Lord's Supper or about a thief, but actually really engage. What is it that's being said here? And I have to say, it's this time round reading Luke has felt very much like, it's warfare. What he's talking about is a war going on. Mm-hmm. And this is the climax. We get the climax here of the war. And so just to jump back into the gospel, we saw at the start of the gospel, Jesus comes as the son of David, the son of God. He's anointed and he goes into battle in the wilderness with Goliath. And it's like... With the devil in the form that David does against Goliath.
I see. Okay.
So he goes and it's like here comes the son of David against the devil, and it's like David and Goliath battle. Okay. Right? Who's going to win the land? Mm-hmm. Who's going to rule the earth? And we then see throughout the whole of the gospel Jesus continuing to fight against evil powers over and over again. He casts out demons, and actually we see that these evil powers are influencing those who should have been least influenced by evil, the Pharisees, the temple rulers. Jesus calls them a wicked and sinful generation. There's like this, the coming together of evil and its influence on the earth rises up against Jesus. Mm-hmm. And Jesus, in these few chapters, comes with the great victory that he brings and the shocking victory that he brings. And the imagery that Luke pulls out, which we can so easily miss, is the imagery of Passover. And really what Luke is saying is this is a brand new Passover that Jesus is bringing on the cross.
Wow. Okay. So, I've been around a little bit. I know a little bit about Passover. But if I'm coming at this new, Luke's been great, hasn't he? Because it's been more for a Gentile, non-Jewish perspective. But what you're saying is that the Passover meal, which is a Jewish meal, coming out of Egypt, what are the key bits of the Passover meal, and how does Jesus, is it fulfill that? Is it hark back to that? What's going on here?
Yeah, so even in just saying Passover, I'm conscious that what I'm actually doing is picking one little part out of a big narrative. Mm-hmm. And the narrative, of course, has 4 aspects to it. So the first aspect of the narrative, of the Exodus narrative, is that Passover achieves freedom from an oppressive power. So the people of Israel are in slavery to Pharaoh. They're having to spend their days making him bricks. They're getting whipped if they don't achieve their purpose, their quota. And what happens in Passover is the culmination of God's action to free the people from slavery. So there's been 9 plagues, increasingly, the powers have been coming up against each other more and more. And then in Passover, this is the one that breaks Pharaoh. The chief god we understand that the Egyptians worshipped was the god of the firstborn son. So it's like Passover is where God, Yahweh, comes and shows he's greater than even the greatest God who could stand against the people of Jesus, the people of him. And so he releases them from power, from the oppressive power. The second thing is that Passover shows that the Israelites are freed from guilt. That there's a sense that an offering needs to be made. God himself has things against Israel, and Passover relieves them of their guilt. It releases forgiveness. The third thing in Passover in this Exodus narrative is that Israel don't just leave Egypt, they get recreated as a new people. They pass through the Red Sea. It's like baptism. It's like there's a new creation beginning, and Israel walking through the wilderness are walking into being like a new humanity, a new people of God. And the fourth thing is that Passover marks a model of mission. It shows that actually God wins battles through his own blood, through self-giving, through sacrificial putting of the blood over the thresholds of houses for all the nations.
So as we're talking about this, I'm conscious like you may be sat there thinking, well, I read the readings this week. I didn't see much of what you're talking about. I feel like there's a movie that I'm watching a sequel, and there's been a movie, and there's loads of references back. Is that what you're saying? Like there's...
Yeah, so that is often how it is with the New Testament.
Yeah.
Like there's a huge amount of assumed knowledge that it has, and we then have to play catch up. Like we learn the New Testament stories, and then we have to think, oh, hold on, what's the backdrop for this? So, for example, Jesus achieves freedom. So, what we see, really interesting, is that Luke makes a really big deal of how Pilate and Herod collaborate together against Jesus. And it's like this kind of oppressive power and this oppressive power, the Romans and the I think it's the Hasmoneans, is it, who are the ruling class of the Jews, who are really mistreating the ordinary everyday people. They come together and make agreement for the first time. And they do it against Jesus. And Luke references us again in Acts chapter 4, I think it is, where he says these guys come together. Why do the nations rage? Why do the people plot in vain? And he says these two guys came together. It's like this is a symbol of how humans come to try and stand against God. And it's an example of Pharaoh. It's like that they are once again acting out what Pharaoh did to Israel.
Like all the power of the state, all the power of the religious establishment together in one.
That's brilliant, Andy. I hadn't thought of it like that, but it's exactly that, isn't it? And there's a big thing in the Bible. In the book of Daniel, you see it particularly, where beasts become symbols of human powers. Because as we see happens so often, right, you give a person power and they end up using it to dehumanize those they're meant to be serving. And I think at this moment we sit recording this while the UK government are in a whole load of trouble, because really what they've done is they've taken the power that they were given by God, we understand from the Bible, all power and authority is from God, and they've just abused it. They've used it for their own ends, and parties and things in number 10 Downing Street's garden, while everybody else is having to do this stuff. And we look at that and think there's something dehumanizing about this.
Yeah.
They are treating us as if we're not as fully human as they are.
Yeah.
And that's what the Bible says powers do over and over again. Yeah. And Jesus comes to bring us freedom from their oppression. So
that's interesting though, isn't it? Because he does that by being killed by them.
Yes, so I mean that's the fourth strand that I pulled out, is that the way Jesus wins this battle, the way that Passover shows is it's the death of an innocent that achieves victory. Now you think, oh, there's this evil power, there's this beastly power, what we need to do, let's go get our arms, let's get our swords. Jesus is like, get your swords. They're like, come on, let's get the swords. And they go and chop off the guy's ear. And he's like, no, that's not how we fight our battles. Yeah. We fight our battles through self-giving sacrifice. And chapter 22 of Luke is Jesus bringing together the disciples to say, let me teach you how we win in my world. And so Jesus grabs the blood and the body, the wine and the bread, and he says, breaking, they're broken, they're given, they're poured out. This is how we win. This is how we win. And of course, the lamb, the Passover lamb, is just, the blood is smeared over the lintels, the door frames. Yeah. And then Jesus, what does he do straight away? And he says, like the Gentiles, they lord it over you, not so with you. Like you should serve. Yeah. And you see this in all four Gospels. So the way he wins the battles over the powers is through self-giving sacrifice.
Giving sacrifice. So that's the freedom piece. Maybe slightly more direct to see is the enabling of forgiveness, isn't it?
Absolutely. So the verdict of the cross is shown symbolically, actually. We don't get a lot of verses in Luke's gospel to say this is what the cross achieved. But we get the narration of this is what happened on the earth. So he says darkness came across the whole land and the sun stopped shining. So what those symbols are is that there's this global act of judgment. Like the whole earth is guilty. It's not just, this thing happened to this person. No, across all the land, darkness fell, and the sun, which lights the whole earth, stopped shining. So it's an act of judgment by God against all people. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, says Paul. And when he looks back on these acts and says, this is what this is about. And so what we see Luke making clear is that we all deserved the cross. There's an element by which Jesus takes onto himself the sins of all people. And the sins are the stubbornness, the refusal to do what God wants, the sort of in that... We all should be on... we talked about separation.
Yeah.
We all should be people on this... If God was just, we'd all be people who, if we looked at our lives, we couldn't say every single second of every single day we have done what God said was the best thing to do. So we all fall that to some extent. Greater or lesser perhaps, but still to some extent. And the amazing thing is that then just this little hint where Jesus is talking with these thieves either side of him, and one of them's like, you idiot, like, blah, blah, blah. And the other one's like, hold on a minute, like, would you remember me?
Yeah.
And Jesus says, a statement of victory. Today you'll be with me in paradise. This thief, this guy who's done everything wrong seemingly, who deserved to die, he acknowledges himself. He sinned. He should be falling under the judgment of the cross, but actually, even before the cross occurs, Jesus says, no, do you know what? What I'm doing now achieves your passageway into paradise.
Amazing. And is there something in, going back to the Passover story, the Israelites had to apply the blood to their own home, didn't they?
Yeah.
And if they didn't, they were still under the judgment.
Yeah.
And so today... what is there an equivalent? Is it taking the Lord's Supper? Is it the statement of trust, like the thief on the cross? But that which is for the whole world, we need to apply to ourselves.
Yeah, I think you're right, Andy. And I don't know. I wonder whether sometimes in evangelical churches we've wanted to say there's this one really clear silver bullet, which is if you pray exactly this form of words and this prayer, then that's mission accomplished. And Luke doesn't seem to give us that chance. I don't think you get in Luke, or even in Acts, like a really neat, this is exactly how you do it. But what is absolutely clear is this. If you come to Jesus, and you kind of take his blood, as it were, and you apply it to your life, that achieves for you the forgiveness of sins.
Yeah.
And that is an act which is probably expressed in a prayer. Forgive me, I'm sorry, Jesus. Like, remember me, the thief says. Yeah. Or it could be the taking of the body and the blood. I'm always nervous about anything that sums up faith, which is such a complex and sophisticated thing, into one tiny little phrase.
Yeah. And yet Luke has shown us through the whole gospel, like, this is for anyone who wants in.
Anyone who wants, if you want to rush towards Jesus, if you say, remember me, I deserve this, and yet I ask for you for mercy. Whatever way you express that,
he'll take you.
He'll take you.
It's good.
It's amazing, isn't it?
And it's not just for individuals, is it? Because we reference in the Passover, it's the forming of a people. So how does that play out in Luke's depiction of what Jesus does?
So the new humanity is created. Of course, we now are so individualistic, aren't we? Your phrase that you told us about from Spain, do you have no grandmother or whatever?
Yeah.
Like, we like to think of ourselves as, I'm Tom and I'm born, I'm going to make my life my own. But the Bible's narrative is that there's so much more heritage that you step into, and that God is introducing you into a people. We're a people being made. And Passover shows us this, because Passover, they all did it. It's the same night to all of Israel, and they all together then walk out of Egypt as en masse under Moses. And this sense, I think, that, okay, you might pray a prayer on your own in your bedroom to Jesus when you're age 12 or whatever, and I might in a gathering at Spring Harvest in Minecraft, age 15, with several other people go forward, but we all walk together as a people into the promised land, as a new humanity. And I think we lose that a little bit too much. We are brothers. We're not blood brothers, but there's something actually deeper and stronger even than what I'd have with Ben or Sam, who are my blood brothers, because of the cross. It's like we're remade. The person we were has almost died on the cross, and now is a new person who is intricately tied to every other person who's gone through that same journey.
Pulls them together. I
think it does. So the Passover imagery, I think, maybe brings an extra richness. I hope it does for you. For me, it brings such a richness to think, God, actually, this is what happened to me when I became a Christian. This is what would happen to me if I was to become a Christian. I'd have like freedom from oppressive powers. I'd have total forgiveness of everything I've ever done wrong. I'd be utterly clean and pure and blameless. And I'd be part of this incredible people who God is taking somewhere. And as Luke shows, like, we are a people who don't just now live like a life, but we are people living a mission shaped by the cross. We are the people who go and carry the light to the nations. We are the people who wait to be clothed with power from on high. The temple has been torn, the curtain. So now we are people in the presence of God, releasing the presence of God to say to a crippled beggar at the temple gate, hey, I don't have money or silver or gold, but get up and walk. And to say to this demonized girl, be freed from the demon, or whatever it is. Like, this is what it is to be the people of God.
Superb.
It's amazing, isn't it? So anyway, that's sort of a bit of a summary of what's gone on in these chapters. Andy, as you read it through, tell us what did it make you think about Jesus?
Well, there was a couple of things that kind of interacted with my week as well. It's funny how that often happens. I think for me, jumping into these chapters this week, and we took the Lord's Supper on Sunday, and I relate to what you said. Sometimes we can read these chapters and it can be over familiar. You kind of get into that mode of, I know this, and yet if you can just slow down a little bit, and I think as well, particularly when I was a young Christian, I was always a bit like, why do they spend so much on the details of the last week? And then I think now I love it, because it's like, oh, Jesus, you know what it is to be betrayed. You know what it is to be under the hands of an oppressive regime, to be shunted from Pilate to Herod and back again. That kind of bureaucracy. I've only experienced it on a kind of limited basis, but some of our friends in English school, they get passed from pillar to post, from administration to administration, and their lives are on hold. And it's like, oh, Jesus, you knew that. You know that. You were rejected by the crowds. You know what rejection is. You suffered under the hands of the soldiers. You were crucified, and just that richness of, the Catholics have the Stations of the Cross, don't they? Reflection, because we don't have a high priest who doesn't know what it is to suffer. He's been there for each of us. So it's just so good to spend time on the cross. It made me grateful that Jesus, you know these sufferings. You can sympathise with us in our weakness. So that was just really, really wonderful. And then on the kind of more challenging side, been having interesting conversations with my kids. and we've had the kind of conversations before of, why don't we wear two types of material? Why don't we follow that law from the Old Testament? And then we were talking about some of this, and my daughter says to me, "So, what commandments from the New Testament are you not following?" And it was really challenging just to think that through. And I think for me, I was challenged by the Luke 21 stuff of, am I ready? Am I living with a state of readiness? That Jesus will return. I don't know if we go into it. It's interesting, that chapter, how much of it is about what already happened in Jerusalem and how much is pointing to his return. But for me, it's been a challenge because a guy says he will return. Do I trust that? Well, yes, I have to now, because he's resurrected from the dead. So that's such a big thing for the resurrection for me, is I now, if I believe him, I will trust what he says. And one of the things he says is, I will return. I will return. And I just, the last week's episode as well, this week, am I ready? Am I living with a sense of readiness? Am I living with that sense of the one who suffered all those things for me will also return to make all things new? And I want to be found on the right side of the separation. And I think, if I'm honest, emotionally, I'm not quite where I should be on that. I think I'm too complacent. I think it's too far off in the future for me. And it's just been a stir to be like, this guy rose from the dead. He said this would happen. He said Jerusalem will fall, and it did. And he says he's coming again, so will you trust him? So it's been a comfort. You know what it is to suffer, and it's been a challenge of, I'm coming back. Make sure you're ready. Make sure you're there. How about for you? What jumped out?
I think, just the simplest thing, but I just came back to again that Jesus did this for us. Like, he went through all of this for me. I mean, I've just been reading quite a lot of Paul and thinking quite a lot of Paul's life, and his summary is, Jesus loved me and gave himself up for me. And I think sometimes I can get quite, I love sort of all the, this is what this is, and this is the imagery from here, and this, and I think that enriches us. But ultimately, all that enrichment must lead us to the point that, and so I think Jesus was a real person who suffered these real things just because he loved me. He was a mega genius. He had all power available to him. He says to the guys, don't you think I could just call 1,000 angels and they just come and do this? But what restrains him? Love. Why doesn't he lord it over people? Love, because he loves me. And he loves you. And to be honest, I think that just the joy that brings up in me. I'm really, really loved. And that has changed my life. That's just utterly, it changes me, softens me again and again when I think of that. And I guess aligned to that, because lots of people can say they love you and want to help you, and some of them really do, and they really want to help you. But he not only had love, but he had power. So he loved me, and he did what needed to be done. Like, he won the victory. So I now live a life that is steeped in his victory. I find that utterly, utterly amazing, and still something I'm trying to wake up to more and more. So that was where that fed into my prayer life this week. Oh God, you are the one who loves us and brings victories, and that I mean, just looking at what's going on in our church at the moment.
I was going to ask you. I was going to say, because the last few weeks we're seeing things of people finding freedom, and that victory being played out in Croydon in 2022. I mean, we often don't like just to throw details out into the internet. what's some of the things that you're seeing, even if you can't share everything?
Well, I mean, one thing that indicates is that, like a few months back, Leslie, my wife, the senior pastor, was doing Tuesday testimony. She started it, and she had like a couple of weeks where we got good ones, and then she was like scratching around trying to find, can we get another Tuesday testimony?
Yeah.
Right, and you get the stories, and they're amazing because they're people's lives. But then this week she was like, I think I've got about 10 amazing testimonies of a guy whose son had a bad back, and he brought him in and he prayed for it, and he just instantly felt better. Somebody who had carried a sort of a fear, like a genuine, deep-seated fear with a medical diagnosis attached to it for years and years, and prayed for, and just felt like this deep lightning, and sort of a sense of that fear no longer gripped them and held them. Somebody else who just, health issues, and prayed for in this moment of like intense presence of God. And they're not our stories to tell.
Yeah.
We'll let people tell their own stories, but I think the thing for me that's really shifted in the last few weeks is that I'm just so convinced that, of course, Jesus will want to heal people. Of course, he'll want to set them free. Of course, he'll want to forgive them of their sins, because he loves them.
Yeah.
And there's some new thing about that for me, which means that when you stretch out your hand to pray for somebody, or when you speak to somebody, you're like, but Jesus has already shown his attitude to this person.
Yeah.
That can never be in doubt.
Yeah.
So of course Jesus is going to want to back that up now with more of his power.
Yeah. Amazing.
Amazing stuff. It really is amazing.
So we're going to be on into Acts, which is written by the same guy, Luke, the sequel. First part we've done, all that Jesus began to do and teach. And then we're going to step into the book of Acts. We'll already have done Acts chapter 1 on Friday, but if you've not done it quite yet, you can catch up. Is there any as we look ahead on the next portion of the journey into the book of Acts, as people start to engage with that, is there anything you'd want to say to us? Just how to engage in that, how to look at the book of Acts?
Well, I think Acts in a way is easier to read than a gospel, because I think the stories tend to be slightly less familiar. And what that hopefully means is that you can use your imagination as you read them and think, hold on a minute, like what would this actually have been like? Like, could I actually imagine myself in this situation?
Yeah.
And I think if we do that, like there's just immense riches to be gathered from Acts. Like you think, hold on a minute, this is what God made the church look like before maybe we all kind of got a little bit, I don't know, stale. This is what it could look like now.
Yeah, amazing. So jump in. As always, daily updates on the website with the devotionals. We're into the book of Acts in February. All the plans for the reading plans, if you're wanting to look ahead and everything, that is all on the website, www.croydonvineyard.org.uk, and hit the New Testament Journey 2022 tab at the top. It's all there. And we'd love you to get involved both by lending your voice with the readings, leaving your comments, letting us have any questions. And it's been brilliant, actually, last 2-3 weeks, just the conversations with people at church. I'm doing this. Sometimes I'm struggling to keep up, but often I'm doing this and I can't quite explain it, but it's changing. It's changing me. It's changing me. And just want to encourage you, keep on keeping on. These 5, 6, 7 minutes of listening in the morning, like, it's very difficult to think of a better investment of time than just placing ourselves before the New Testament, placing ourselves before the words of Jesus, doing a little bit more of just, imagining myself there, praying it through, seeking to live it. It's absolute dynamite. So keep going with it.